Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning today's three parakim Rambam, Hilchos B'choiras, right? The laws of firstborn offerings, Perek or parakim Chamishi, Shishi, and Shvi. And we're starting with Perek Chamishi. We're going to have more about a suffix B'choir and also the Isur of doing business with firstborns, as we will see in this chapter. This chapter has 11 halachas. Says the Rambam, halacha Aleph, Rachel, you have a sheep, Shalei Bikra, that did not yet give birth, and the older Shnei Zacharim, she gave birth to twins, Afilu Yotz, and both of them are male, Afilu Yotzu Shnei Roshem Kechot, even if to our naked eye, it looks like they were born at the same time. However, first of all, the rule is there's no such a thing as two things happening exactly at the same time. One came before the other. It is we who don't know which one is the firstborn. So we don't know which one is the Bechar. That there is a Bechar, the Vadai. We don't know which one. So the rule is the kohen is going to take the weaker one, the lesser expensive one. But v'hasheni suffix Bechar. Each one might be a Bechar. In other words, as we learned in the previous chapter, right? When it comes to the financial question, the rule is hamaitze mechaverei olavarayim. But when it comes to a suffix isur, then you have to be machmir. So that no one can do anything with neither of the animal before they get blemished, because each one might be a carbon. But once, right, they get blemished, now not only don't we have to give to the kohen both, we don't have to give the kohen the more expensive one. Now, furthermore, if one of them died, then we can always argue that the one that died was the Bechar. Even, by the way, if the one that died was the more expensive one. Again, the concept, when it comes to money, finances, now we have to wait until the Chai gets blemished, for sure. But the Kohen won't get neither of them. One of them died, that's it. And the other one is, it might not be the Bechar. So again, you had the one Rachel, you have one sheep, and we know this sheep that never gave birth before. It gave birth to twins, but two different genders. And we don't know which one came out first. So Zachac is also a suffix, Shema Nekeva Yotzos Tchila. Here again, the owner can't do anything with the Zachac until it gets blemished, but the Kohen gets nothing. Halacha beis, if you own two sheep and neither of them gave birth before, and now the yoldu shnei zacharim, even though we don't know, even in the case where we don't know which child came from which mother, doesn't matter. Both of them are vadai bechar, shneim l'koyim, zachar u'nekeva. Doesn't matter that I don't know who the mother is. The Zachar, both mothers, both Rechelov, were Shaloi Bikru. So the Zachar is for sure a Bechar. Zachar and Nekeva, Zachar Lakai. If you have Shnei Zacharim and Nekeva, now Shnei Zacharim and Nekeva, guys, so it could be that one animal gave birth to two males. One of those are to a Kohen. Could be one animal gave birth to a male, just to the Kohen. And the other one gave birth to male, female. In that case, the Kohen would get both. But it could be the other one gave birth to female, male. Vadai, the Kohen has one. We don't know which one. Let's go back to Halacha Aleph. So he gets the weakest one. And the other male, it could be that both males are Bechar, because if one animal gave birth to male only, and the other one gave birth male, female, then there could be both of them are Bechar. And therefore, you have to wait until they get blemished. And like we had in Halacha Aleph, that ve'im meis echad mehem, then ein lo kohen klum. Shezeh hazochar achai sofik b'charhu. It's mechaver olo barai. Next case. If yoldu shtei nekevos u'zachar, now in such a scenario, even though both rechelov shaloi bikru, but if now you have three kindalach, it could be that Rachel number one gave birth to a nekeva. Rachel number two gave birth to Nekeva Zachar. In that case, there is no bachar. Or shnei zacharim ushtei nekevos, in which could be nekeva zachar, nekeva zachar. It could be that the zachar came first. It could be both zacharim came first. And he has zacharim safik bachar. Sha'ani yoim is shema nekeva noldet chila v'achar kach hazachar. Since it's shayach for neither of them to belong to the kohen, lefikach ein lo kohen klum shamaytz mechaver all about ayah. Now let's begin to spice things up. So Atkan were scenarios where you owned one Rachel or two Rachelov, and neither of them gave birth before. Now we're going to have you own two animals. One of them, Bikra, one of them already gave birth. No matter what comes now, not a Bachar. V'achas le Bikra. And v'yoldu shnei Zacharim. You don't know who mothered who, doesn't matter. You own both. One of them, Shaloi Bikra. Vadai gave birth to a Bachar. We don't know which one. Well, Echad Lei ve'Echad L'Kohen. And the Rambam doesn't have to repeat which one will the Kohen get, the weaker one, the lesser expensive one. B'chol Echad Mehem is Safik Bachar. But the Rambam writes.
Sorry,
yes.
Weaker one of the male or female?
No, of the male. The female is never a Bachar.
Got it. So the female doesn't count in any of these.
Yeah. In our case, in this case right now, there is no female.
Right. I'm saying generally, the female does not count.
No, exactly. And furthermore, if any one of these die, then we can say that the one that died was the Bachar. Ein lo kohen klum. Shezeh hachai safiku. V'cheinim yoldu zachar unekeva. I can argue that the Bikra was the one that gave birth to the Zachar. The Shaloi Bikra gave birth to the Nekeva. Ein kan lo kohen klum. Shezeh hazachar safik. And in all of the above cases, Halacha Gimel just repeats what we have been saying by heart. That Kol B'char Shu Safei. It's not like since you don't have to give it to the Kohen, you're good to go. You're not good to go. Dinoi Sheyira Achiyipol by Mum. You have to first wait until it gets blemished, and only then, even in the cases when it's a suffix and therefore you don't give it to the Kohen, now all of that is based because of the rule of Hamaytzim Mechavere, all of Arayo. So therefore, in all of the above cases, if the Kohen chaps that child, then we flip the Hamaytzim Mechaveroi. Then we don't take it out of the hand of the Kohen. The Kohen now, can the Kohen offer it as a carbon? Absolutely not. Because don't forget, guys, if something is not a Bukhar, then it's Chulin. You cannot bring Chulin Lazara. The Kohen also has to wait until it gets blemished. But once it gets blemished, now the Kohen gets to keep it. The very clear.
But mitokef ma the Kohen has the right to claim it if it's a Safek Bechor, because you want to say that it's going to go to a Hegdish, but it's not.
Not Hegdish, no, Bechor belongs to the Kohen. To a Kohen.
It belongs to the Kohen in Mikoach a Korban, no?
And when one second, like we had in the beginning, and if the animal gets blemished, then it belongs financially to the Kohen. A Bechor that gets blemished, Bisman she'ein bias, it belongs to the Kohen. What happens? You wait until it gets blemished, and then the Kohen gets to eat it. It's the property of the Kohen. Halacha dal. Mi shahoya be'edroi mi bakreis v'she'enim avakreis. You have many. Some of them gave birth before. Some of them did not give birth before. The older. The ein sham adam. And v'nichnas, when you go in after the birth, you find that the mevakreis, the one that had previously given birth, they are giving to suck baby in the kavos. That's evidence. In other words, when we see a child with a mother sucking from the mother, we don't say maybe after birth, for some reason, one mother made a connection with someone else's baby. Is that possible? Yeah, but halachically, we don't say that happened. And ubenashal zu baleitzel zu. Ella harei hadavar b'cheskasoi shekol achas minika bana. So if the one that you know never gave birth before is giving to suck a male, then we say the male is a bechor. It's not a suffix, and it's brought as a carbon. Halacha hey. Shnayim shivkidu shnei zecharim eitzel roya. Two different people gave zecharim Now, we're not talking about the mother here, guys. We're talking about the child itself. One of them was a Bukhar. One in itself was a Bukhar. And the other that was given over to the care of a shepherd was Pashut. Umeis echad mehem. We don't know which child died. So the din is that the Roya doesn't have to deal with these doubts. The Roya tells both people, come on, let me give you back. And he puts the living one in front of them. Now, guys, we have to speak, just to add something very important. That says the Lechem Mishnah, that the Roya, the shepherd, never knew lechatchila who gave which one. If two people give a Roya a shepherd and they identify to the shepherd which one they gave, in such a case, the shepherd is obligated to know which animal came from whom. And if he gets mixed up, he's going to be guilty. Not in our case. In our case, he never knew. He never knew. Now, this one is a Safik Bechar. What's the din of a Safik Bechar? What did we learn until now? First of all, you have to wait until it gets blemished. But afterwards, who is the muchzak? Both people. That's the word. None of these two people can claim ownership. Now, halacha vav, and as we will see in the Rambam itself, unlike halacha hey, as we just quoted from the Lechem Mishnah, we're speaking about a scenario where the Roya got these animals shaloi midatoi. Halacha vav can be midatoi, and we don't say he's a presheya, as we'll see in a moment. Hifkid b'char eitz balabais. We're not talking about a Roya. We're talking about a person, I can give over my article and I can ask you to be a shomer. The shomer is called the balabais. V'nichai balabais in pashut shaloi. The balabais put that animal together with his pashut, a bukhar and a pashut. And now we'll make echad mehem any duazehu. So what do we say, guys? We don't only say vis-a-vis the kohen hamoitze mechavedo olavaraya, but like we had in halacha hey, but both people will become the muhzak. No, here we say more. The balabais remains the muhzak.
Even though he made the mistake?
Well, 1 second. Let's read inside. No, the owner of the article of the animal that was given over as a pikadon, that was the bukhar. The balabais had a pashut. 1 second. Balabais he owned the pashut. One of them died. We don't know which died. If the balabais died, then the one that he does not even own belongs to a kohen. If the one that he was given as a pikadon died, then he gets to keep his. We don't know, so he gets to keep his. Even if the owner, the mafkid was a kohen. Shaharei midas ba'al habachar kinicha ima pashut shabalabayis. In other words, balabais is not a presheya. The balabais is not a presheya because we're speaking about a scenario where the owner of the bechar put it together with the pashut of the balabais. The owner knew about that, and the owner, we're speaking about animals that once you mix them up together, we're not going to know who is whose. So you should not have allowed for that to happen lechatchila. Now that there's a confusion, you're going to lose. Halacha zay. Now this is in contrast. Eloi nechshatu Yisrael ala b'chayris. In other words, we learned in Perek Beis that kohanim, they were not trusted when it comes to a b'char. Being that it has to be gifted to them, we had many chshashois on the kohanim, not a Yisrael. Meaning, let's start with the din. Are we suspect that Yisrael is going to make a blemish in the Bukhar? No, we don't. And even in a case where you have a Safik Bukhar, like we have in this chapter, and by a Safik Bukhar, the Balabais knows that once the animal gets blemished, he will be able to eat it. We still don't suspect that he's going to make the blemish. And therefore, this is a Safik Bukhar. And also the royan loy mumay. In other words, we are not chayish like we are by a kohen, that he was the one that made the blemish. If he comes with an animal to show it to an expert that has a blemish, we trust that he did not make that blemish.
But we suspect the Kohen.
What's your question, Kevan?
So we suspect the Kohen and we don't suspect the Israel.
Yeah. Of course, because a Kohen, but when you know that the Bechar belongs to you as a Kohen, then you'll treat it like your own property. Masha'ink in the Yisrael, even though they have a scenario where Safik Bechar, because of Hamaitz Mechavedi, belongs to the Yisrael, he never considers a Bechar something that's his enough for him to go ahead and make a blemish himself. Allah Kol HaKochim
Chet.
Halacha Ches. First of all, let's just quickly review. The din of a Bechar does not apply to animals that are kochim. Now let's remember that once an animal that was consecrated at a time where it was unblemished, in other words, once an animal is imbued with Kedushas Mizbeach, even if it gets a blemish later, it's never going to fully lose its Kedusha, even though it's going to be redeemed. An animal that lachatchila had a mum, even though someone said that this is going to be a carbon, if it lachatchila had a mum, it was never more than Kedushas Mammon. So Kol HaKochim that first had a blemish, a kavua blemish, prior to it being consecrated, which means that even when it was consecrated, it never got Kedushas Haguf, it never got Kedushas Mizbeach. Yes, it has to be redeemed, but once it gets redeemed, it fully goes out l'chulin. After it was redeemed, if then it gave birth for the first time, so then we say the child is a Bechar. I know that Bechar is not noyag bebehemas kochim, but it's not kochim. But im kodam mum oiver lehegdation oishegdation to mimim was when an animal that was, when the animal was consecrated, it was fully imbued with kedushas mizbeach, even though later it got a mum kavua, and even though it was already redeemed, and then it gave birth to the menabachayra. As we learn that even though the animal was fully redeemed, a vestige of kedusha is still in the animal, and therefore you're never allowed to share it. You can't do avodah with it, as we learned in Ilchas Meila. That still includes the animal in the din of behemas kochim. That ain't din b'chayr noyag behemas kochim. Halacha 9. Halakeyach behemah b'mais ma'is l'sheni b'Yerushalayim. You bought a chulin animal, but it's with ma'is l'sheni money, which means that you're mechoyv to eat it in Yerushalayim. If that animal gave birth, has it din b'char? Aval, in contrast, if you buy a behemoth from Peirosh Shviz, then we say Hadezub Turam and Abachayr. Why? Because Lefisha Ein Rishoy Lischar Peirosh Shviz, as we learn in Ilchas Shmita, Sharei Nemar Bava Hoisa Shabbos Haaretz Lochem Loachla. Chazal learn Lochem Loachla v'Lo Lischayr. Now, Im Tiachayavas b'Bechayra. If you'll have to give it as a bechor, Hadezem Mistaker b'Bechor, then you're going to benefit wrongfully. What will be the benefit? In other words, there is a din that, remember, from Ilchas Shmita, if I buy something with the money of Shmita, if I did purchase something, not only does the original produce of Shmita remain Kadosh, but the final product also has Kedusha Shmita, which will include, just for example, there's Man Biur. So let's say a person had grain, and they exchanged it either for money, for an animal, directly for an animal. It makes no difference. The din is that when this grain is no longer available, l'chayas hasada, in that region, from the 3 regions of Eretz Yisrael, then this animal cannot be eaten. This animal has to be destroyed. If we will allow it to be holy, we're not going to say that. It's kachin. You understand? And Machlal, I would say even more than that. The coin, when I give something to a kohen, the fact that I'm giving it to a kohen, even though I have to give my bechar, the kohen is grateful to me. There is a benefit that I'm getting. I'm not allowed to benefit from Peirosh Shviz. So therefore, they said that animal won't have a din of a bechar. Another thing says the Rambam, we cannot do business with food items that may not be eaten. Here we go. even though we're allowed to sell it as we spoke in Perek Aleph, but that's the rule. You can't do business with b'chayres, and that's consistent with all other items that you can't eat. Halacha Yud. Lakach b'chayr l'mishna b'noi oy l'regel v'loy tzarach loy. So then the din is it's a one-time thing. It's a one-time thing. Then mutar l'machri. That's not called doing business. And by the way, that's very similar to the dinim that we have in Hilchas Isurei Machalois. Can't do business. We're talking about a one-time thing. Now there are times that a person can sell non-kosher, not as his business. He's not doing schayda. He happened to get it. What should he do with it? Halacha Yudal. And finally says that Rambam ein shamin b'chayros temimim liyisrael. Now in the times of Chazal, this was a normal business, and that is that you had an animal, you gave the animal to a shepherd. When you gave it to the shepherd, you evaluated the animal collectively. Now the animal is worth $100. The shepherd took care of it, gave it food, and at some later point, you evaluate the animal again. Let's say now it's worth 200. The original 100 belongs to the owner. The extra money, the extra value that came through the work of the shepherd is divided into half. That would be a normal business. So says that Rambam, a Yisrael may not do that. Listen to this Yisrael. He has a bechor, it's not his. He has to give it to a kohen. So he thinks to himself, okay, I'll give it to the kohen. But hold on. Let me go give it to a shepherd. Let the shepherd make it worth more value. You understand? So, ein shaman b'chaydes t'mimim liyisrael. Because it's not his. I'll tell you more than that. That's called doing business with a bechor. Avol shaman lahem b'chayres balamumen. In other words, if the owner, listen, that's a chiddush. I mean, the chiddush is that if the bechor has a blemish, even though it has to be given to a kohen, nevertheless, you can make this type of business transaction with the shepherd. Eventually, you're going to get it back and you're going to give it to the kohen. Since when the bechor, which belongs to the kohen, could be eaten even by a Yisrael. So it's something that's allowed to be eaten by a Yid. So you can do business with it. The shamin b'chayres temimim lakana b'zman hazeh, even b'zman hazeh, a kohen cannot do anything with it prior to it getting blemished. It doesn't matter. Since it will be eaten, because there is no mizbeach yet, shem oinim le'yochel b'muman, ve'ein tzarach leimer, that with it, once it's gifted to the kohen, sheshamu lahem b'alei mumin. Okay. The big question is that Bizman Hazeh, why can't he even do that? Why can't it be done even to a Yisrael? Just like the Rambam Paskin that Abul Shamin Lahem B'chaydes Balamumen, so Bizman Hazeh, even the Temimim, it's not going to be going on the altar. The word is that since the animal, as unblemished, has Kedushas Mizbeach, doing any type of business with it is some sort of bizayin of kosher. Okay. So this was the conclusion of the dinim of b'chayros. Now we are starting Hilchas B'chayros Perek Shishi. That's opening up a new topic, and that's the topic of Ma'aser Behema. What's the din of Ma'aser Behema? That all of the domesticated animals, from the category of bakar v'tzoyin, only cattle and soin. Soin includes sheep and goats that are born into one's herd that year. That's, the first Mishnah in Rosh Hashanah. When does the year begin? But there's a Rosh Hashanah for this. So we have to give the 10th becomes holy, belonging to the owner. You don't have to give it to anyone, but it has to be brought as a korban. Ma'aser Behema. Says that Rambam, this chapter has 16 halachas. We're going to learn the foundational rules of Ma'aser Behema. Says that Rambam mitzvah lahafrish echad ma'asaram bikol behemois tohoresh yivoldu la'adam b'chol shana v'shana. You have to separate one from each 10 animals that are tohoresh, as we'll see, and we're speaking not just tohoresh, but behema, not chayas. It's only 3 types: cattle, sheep, and goats, and they have to be separated. Not if I own 1,000 animals and I put them all together. I have to have every animal's congregated, the ones that were born that year. From them I separate the 10th. The ein mitzvah zunei heges ela bibakar and vitzoin, cattle and sheep. And the word sheep is a generic term, as we keep on having in halacha. Tzoin really means what we would call sheep and goats, sheep or goats. Shenemer, as it says, this parshas and B'chol Koisai, the Torah clearly says v'chol maser bakar v'tzoin. So it's only bakar v'tzoin. Other animals, even though these are animals that are kosher to be eaten, because don't forget, guys, what the only animals that are kosher to go on the mizbeach is only bakar v'tzoin. So that's it. So from these animals, you have to separate it. Halacha Bey says that Rambam Meiser Behema is noyeg only if the animals to begin with are chulin. If the animals are consecrated, then they're not shaykh to this. Avaloi b'mukdash. Another din v'noyeg not only ba'aretz, also b'chutz la'aretz. The mitzvah of Meiser Behema is not only b'fnei abayis, and also shaloi b'fnei abayis. People read this and say, "Upa, I never heard about that." I know you didn't, because this is midai raisa. However, Avol Chachamim Asru la'aser behema b'zman hazeh, and the Chachamim made the takana she'em ma'aser elo b'fnei abayis. Why? Because don't forget that when you separate the 10th animal, as we'll see how it was done, we don't know which animal will be the 10th. If the 10th animal is a tamim, that animal taka has to go on the altar. Zeh Shema yechlu tamim. Now that animal is mamash kedushas mizbeach, and if God forbid, if someone eats it, the chayv kadis. However, that's only midrabanan, which means that if you did this type of tithing, since midai raisa, you're chayiv to do it, it's effective. And that 10th animal is taka meiser. Now, like any other cut, if a person today wrongfully, many people think, since we believe Mashiach is coming, or we believe that we have to build a mizbeach, whatever you believe it can happen today, no matter what angle you're coming from. A person says, I'll externalize my belief. I'm going to be magdash something about the kabayas. I'm going to be magdash an animal. We learned that I think that was the siyum of shkolim. We're not allowed to do that. We're not allowed to do that because a person might be moyel behegdish. Or if you're going to be separate an animal or kachim, that's the whole word. But if you did it, that's taka holy. What do you have to do? You have to wait until it gets blemished. As we will see soon. Now, this obligation says that Rambam halachi gimel hakol chayavim b'maiser behema. Doesn't matter who the owner is, even kohanim, even leviim, and for sure Yisrael. Halacha dalid din maiser behema. Who? What's the din? But it's in the category of kachei kalim that it has to first of all be slaughtered in the azara, not l'tzvain hamizbeach. But it's kachem kalim and v'zorkim domoi. That's the unique. Only zrika achas keneged hayisoid. Not only not like the chatas and all four corners lachatchil on top. By behema chatas, it's on top. Don't confuse it with the bird chatas, which is on the bottom, right? But normally you have shtaim shein arba. These are the few karbanis that you only put one application on the altar, and then umaktiran emurav. And now ushar habasa nechal ba'alim only in Yerushalayim, but it can be eaten by anyone, by male, by female. Kishar kochem kalim ve'ein lakahanim by klum elikulay laba'alim kepesach. Now, if the animal is blemished, now the unique halacha of Ma'aseh Behema, an animal that's blemished, if you remember, may not be consecrated lamizbeach. Here it's different. Here, Hashem, as we'll go later in the details, that there's a system how you came to the 10th. Whichever one came out the 10th, you're going to declare that to be holy. Could be that animal lechatchila was blemished, and a chanami. So, or the animal could be wholesome and then it gets blemished. So the din is after it was consecrated, or the 10th one happened to be a blemished animal. Now, mamish like a bachar. Now, a bachar belongs to the kohen. This belongs to you, to the owner. This belongs to the owner. If it's blemished now it's your property.
If he can't make it to Yerushalayim, he just keeps it till it's blemished, then eats it.
So yeah, but that's not a good thing. You're saying
no, he cannot.
He
cannot get there.
Okay, correct. That goes b'chlal. Like if I make an adava, forget about my. I mean, I take an animal and I say you are an oilo as a donation. The animal gets blemished. That's it. Yeah, but the goal is to fulfill your pledge. Halacha ma'aseh behema asur limkar oisek yishu tamim. And mamish, the Torah says regarding ma'aseh behema the words lo yigoel. Lo yigoel literally means don't redeem it. But the Rambam is explaining that the words not redeeming it means according to oral tradition, doesn't mean just don't redeem it when it's unblemished. It means that when it's unblemished, when it's tamim, you may not sell it. Even though you would think, why? The owner knows that it's a ma'aser behema. The new guy's going to buy it, and he says, I'll bring it as a carbon, and I'll eat after the emurim, the basar in Yerushalayim. You're not allowed to do that. And more than that, sometimes God says, don't do something. The I'avid, yes mahani, loy mahani. The Rambam says, loy mahani. Here, you can't even break this. Means the transaction never took hold. Comes hand in hand. The example is if someone declares on their property, which means it belongs to the kayhanim. Once you made that declaration, it's not yours to sell. If then you sell it, or the din is that if a person, with all of the conditions of a yafas toyer, after he's up to the point where his two options are marry her or set her free, what the Torah says is he may not sell her, and if he did so, he also, that sale is not valid. Likewise over here.
The funds of the buyer. And according to Rambam, what would be the status of the funds of the buyer?
So the money has to go back to the original owner. It's not your money. Now this din, mipi hashmua, that lo yigol means you're not allowed to sell it, which means you cannot sell it. That's only when the meiser is tamim. Once the meiser becomes blemished, like we just learned, then that animal belongs to the owner. By biblical law, the owner then can sell it. However, not only can you not sell it when it's alive, but even if, because it's blemished, it's yours, and you already shechted it. Now you want to sell the meat. Even that may not be done. Why did they make this takana? Why did they make this gezerah? Which is in violation of the lo yigol. Lefikach. So once you can't do any type of sale with it, you cannot weigh one portion against the other. So in other words, by a bachar, even though we learned that bachar tamim may not be sold from one coin to the other, but we did allow for kohanim to exchange, even a perfect exchange, one against the other. But by ma'aser behema, we don't even allow that, because that gives the appearance of you're selling it. Halacha zayin, u'ma'aser behema shel yisoymim shenishchad demumay. And again, don't forget that the issur of selling it is only midrabanan. They lechatchila never made it by orphans. We're speaking about minor orphans. Then yes, mutar lemachre kedarkoi. Why? In other words, we always want to prevent orphans from suffering a loss. And many times these gezeiras midrabanan were lechatchila not applied in a scenario where the orphans will lose.
Rabbi, usually they have orphans and widows together. How come you don't see the widow in here?
Because it's only because they're minors. It's not only over here. It's about the fact that they're minors. Allah ches. Ma'aser shenishchad b'mumay. And we just learned midrabanan, can't do business with it, can't sell it. However, you can only not sell the meat. The animal parts that are halachically not meat, yes, could be sold. And what will that include? Mutar limkor chelboy. Now, guys, the chelev, the fats that you could sell, are the forbidden fats. Obviously, right? The shuman, the permissible fats, dinoy kabasa. Gid of the sinews, va'oida in the hide, the atzmoisev and the bones. That is allowed to be sold. And now we're going to find a loophole. What will be the loophole? Havla'a. In other words, you're selling two items together. If one of the two halachically, the rabbanan at least, cannot be sold, so what we say is, no, I'm only selling item number one, but I'm charging double. The reason why the guy is agreeing to pay double is because he's going to get item number two that may not be bought. That's called havla'a. You are including it. No, it's the guy is telling the purchaser, you buy the hide. You buy the hide and the fats and the sinews. But he gives a big number, and in it, I'll give you the meat. That's okay. But hold on. Now the question is, see, the Rambam wrote, you can only sell it when you sell the hide. Now, just practically, hide has value. So when you're selling the hide and the chelev and the gidam, there is value. What about bones? Generally, bones in many places have very little value. So there's a limit of the havla. If you're only selling the bones and you're saying, well, I'm going to give you the meat with the bones, only pay for the bones. It depends how much are bones worth in this location. Only if you live in a location where the value of the bones are expensive, then if then mutter. But if not, if it's the way it normally is, that the bones are very inexpensive, then there's a limit to the din of avla. Halacha 9, right? We have in the Mishnah, right, when Shemitah, right? We learned that a lulav is not included in Shemitah because a lulav is not a pedi. And the esrog is nivla, you sell the lulav. And by the way, now it makes sense because it used to be when I grew up, you only paid the $1,000 for the esrog. They used to throw in the lulav. Now, here in LA, you pay a few $1,000s for the esrog. I'm being magazin with a few thousand, but we'll get there. By the time this goes online, we're already up to 480 for the Yanava esrog. If Halavite comes from there, then you pay for the lulav. You pay separate here in LA, separate.
You're not too far off, Rabbi.
Huh? We're not that far off.
Yeah.
Our kids, when they learn this, after Mashiach, God willing, they're going to hear how it used to be. There's no end to it, guys. It's Pashat HaRachmanos on our kids. That's the way I see it. I don't know how they're going to do it. And I knew that my parents had Rachmanos on me. They looked at the world. They had no idea how we're going to. We don't know how we're doing it, guys. Everyone is believed to say on a mum that mum zeme elav ba. They are allowed to say so. Again, as we learned by Kohanim, they are believed to say al meiser. And therefore, v'royin adam mumei meiser shaloi, or umatiroi if he's a mumcha. The question is why? Why is it different? So the very simple answer: by a bechar, you're not allowed to make a mum. There's no way out. A bechar is a bechar. Meiser behema. If you want to circumvent meiser behema, legally you can do it. How can you do it? Prior to you following the procedure that we will learn in the next chapter. Once you have all of the animals in the corral, prior to you going 1, 2, 3, 10, you then are allowed to make a blemish on every animal. One is not allowed to be matalmum bekachin. Prior to the meiser, it's not holy. If someone doesn't want to deal with this, they can make all of their animals halachically blemished. And by the way, it's very easy to do so. As we learned, the numbers of blemishes that are considered mum kavua, some of them are very subtle. They don't devalue the animal at all. They only make it not valid to go on the mizbeach. So if someone can, we believe everyone. You're speaking about someone that wants to get out of it. He could have done it kosher. Why would he do it not kosher? Okay. Person will be allowed first to blemish all the animals in the corral and then separate meiser, knowing that whichever one will come out the 10th is already blemished. You can do that. If the animal did come out tamim, and you, the owner, are saying it got blemished, we don't suspect anyone of doing it themselves. When we have that suspicion, by the way, then that person cannot benefit from it. You can't benefit from, like we learned by the Bukhar. But we don't have such a chashash to begin. If you purchase, you're loikeach. I purchased lambs, right? That would have been tithed by their owners. The big chiddush here, guys. When people hear about meiser, right? If I have tevel, produce, Yakir, and I sell the produce to you untithed, which I shouldn't have. Talmud Chacham has to tithe it first. You have to tithe it. It's untithed. Meiser behema is not that way. If I, the owner meaning it was born in my herd, once they became of age, as we'll learn more details later, they are in their 8th day or older from when they were born. In other words, now, if they would be meiser, if I would do the procedure, then the 10th would have been meiser behema. If I sold them all to you, if I did that, you b'chlal don't have to tithe it. It's amazing. You circumvent the whole thing. Whether you purchased them, whether the owner gave it to you as a gift, the owner would have done it, but now it's not his. He sold them. First of all, the sale is a sale. But the big chiddush here is that there is no inherent tevel here. This will be consistent with other details that we'll learn soon. I'll just give you an amashal. When I have produce, guys, prior to me tithing it, no one can benefit from it. Tevel miser b'dei shamayim. Meiser behema, I am allowed to buy into. I'm allowed to eat these animals up before I tithe them. It's crazy. It's once I did the procedure that we'll learn in the next chapter, and now the 10th becomes Meiser Behema. Ooh, now it's holy. Only if it gets blemished, going to be eaten. Prior to doing the act of the tithing, they don't have a din of tevel. It's like a mitzvah. God says do it, but it's not like prior to doing it, it's not kosher. That's the way it is by produce. That's not the way it is by the animals. It's a whole different type of meiser.
Can you just blemish the 10th one as they go through the gate to be counted?
No. Well, the best way would be to blemish them all if you're looking to get at them.
And then
make
you can have
nick. You make a little what the meisim get. You make a little nick on the lid. It's not mamish nothing.
And then you can do whatever you want with them.
Well, you have to separate meiser, but then you'll never have an issue with dealing like now. Bisman hazeh. Anyways, guys, bisman hazeh, we don't separate it. That was halacha base. Okay, let's go right. That means the buyer, the recipient, b'chlal doesn't have to tithe it. Wow. And therefore, partners are making a partnership. Each one bringing into the partnership a certain number of animals. For example, and now they mix them all up together, and now they are partners. So it's as if, even though I didn't fully sell it, but I sold my exclusive ownership rights over it because now we own it. Because we view every tleh kimachor. I know that in Goyish law, lahavdol, there's a concept, I only know this word in Portuguese, a pessoa jurídica, which means the company owns it. That's why in the Goyish law, a company goes bankrupt and the owners are exempt because the company went bankrupt, not the owner. Jewish law, which is the emes, doesn't work that so simple. But here, in this angle, even though I owned it, was born into my herd, and now I made a partnership with you, but we own it, it's not like we view all of it as sold. It was sold from me to us. It was sold from me to us. So it's exempt.
It's like business loss or personal loss.
Yeah. And I want you to know there's a chiddush here because I know that we are familiar with business laws, Kavan, but in Jewish law, it's not so pashut. We don't always say that the business law said, not personal. We link it. You can't go bankrupt in Jewish law. You can't say that the business went bankrupt. You owe the money. You went bankrupt. Here we do say it. In other words, it was not born in their reshus. Just that. It was born to the father. The father passed away. And again, in other times, in other areas of halacha, we view the children mamish in the place of their father. You don't even need a kinyan. But for this, we say, no. However, let's go back to the first case. I gave 100, you gave 100 animals. Okay, I got it. These 200 animals are exempt. But now these 200 animals gave birth. The animals now were born to the partnership. They have to tithe it. Whether it's to the shutfim, whether it's to the brothers, chayavim b'maiser. Notice we don't say that meiser is only on a yachid. No, the chiyuv of a meiser goes on whoever the owner is. If you have 2 owners, they're mechuyev to tithe it. If you have 10 owners, they're mechuyev to tithe it. But if it was born under one type of ownership and prior to tithing it, it was gifted or sold to another type of ownership, it will be completely exempt. If the partnership wasn't money, and now with the money they bought animals, or brothers after they bought the animals, these animals belong to the brothers. They belong to the partners. However, what happens if after the animals were born in a herd that belongs to partners? Then Or they separated the partnership. And then they remade a partnership. So really, you would think, well, you're back to where you started. No, you're not. Two transactions happen: the dividing and the reformulating. And now, which were already exempt, the new animals, will, of course, will be chayiv to be tied, but not these. That you can argue that if there were partnerships and they didn't divide their partnership by each one getting something else, gedoyim keneged gedoyim, teloyim keneged teloyim, 10 for 10. Let's go like this, guys. If we would have applied the concept of berera, then maybe we could have argued that lechatchila, each partner always owned that half. We don't say that. And yes, they have a din of lekuchin. Very good. Halacha Yud Aleph, ha'achim, or and v'hashutfim, that they inherited. Let's go to achim. The father left over money and animals. Partners own together money and animals, and they owned it lechatchila together. It means these animals that give birth will be animals in which they're chayiv to tie. They began to divide their partnership. We already learned once you divide the partnership, each one will have a din of a lekeach. What happens if they divided the money, but they didn't yet divide the animals? Then we say yes, chayavim b'maiser, because shadayin loy nasu abehemus lekuchin. And the same thing, it's all consistent. If they divided the animals, even though they didn't divide the money, as far as the animals are concerned, the animals are exempt. Halacha Yud Beis. Halakeach asaru ubar b'mei iman. Someone buys 10 fetuses. So what did we say? That who's chayiv to tithe it? The person into whose herd it was born. That's called born. And if I only bought the fetuses, they were born to me. Kulam nechnasim ledir. All of them have to be put into the corral, as we'll see in the next chapter. Please asein. Why? Next case, halacha Yud Gimel, koyin shenaflu loy eser behemus begezel ager. So just like quickly, chazah the rule of gezel ager. If Reuven gazels from Shimon, and he takes an oath, like the end of Vayikra, and Reuven denies that he stole, and then he does tshuva. So the din is, right, that he has to give back the money, add a halachic fifth, and bring a asham gezelis. What happens if someone steals from a convert who did not have children post-conversion, and then they take the oath, and now the convert passes away, and now they do tshuva? To whom do they have to pay the keren v'choimish? To God. How do you give it to God? By giving it to the kahana. That's the case over here. So koyin shenof loy esemem zugez lager turim in amaiser. Wow. Why? Because shemat nas kohuna are called matanos. It was not born in his herd. And v'kvar beyanu shanidim matana patim in amaiser. Beautiful. Halacha Yudal. All animals in one's herd are brought into the corral to be tithed. Again, as we'll see in the next chapter, meaning, even though we know that a Baal Mum is not allowed to be offered on the Mizbeach. So one would have thought, don't even put the Baal Mum in. It doesn't work that way. You gather, Bein Tamimim, Bein Baal Mumin, even Isurei Mizbeach. Isurei Mizbeach refers to an animal that, God forbid, was set aside to be worshipped as an avodah zarah. All right? An animal with which an act of bestiality was committed with. All of them have to be put in there, even though they are also not allowed to be offered as a korban. They're called Isurei Mizbeach, even though they're not the asur to be eaten, but they're not allowed to be put on the oath. They're put in there. And if that happens to be the 10th, okay, so then you won't have to bring it as a korban. Chutz, what cannot go in there? And this is only piyashmua, kalayim, a hybrid, an animal that's treif, even though you can argue, so what? Let the animal go in there, and if that's the one, so then you're exempt from bringing it as a korban. We don't say that. Or and an animal that was not born vaginally, the yoytze doifen. And here an animal that's not yet in the 8th day from birth, because by animals prior to it being by yoyim hashmini v'hala yiratza l'karban l'Hashem, right? Shivas yamim tiyatachasimai. Shkolei l'ptunim anamaiser. Furthermore, a yasam was speaking about an animal here. In other words, if the mother was slaughtered, and then they removed the animal, That means from when it came into the world, it never had a mama. That animal is not even put inside the pen. Why not? If even Balei Muman, just start with that, and even Isurim Mizbeach, so one would argue, Gamzeh. That's what Hashem told Moshe Rabbeinu. Halachat Tezvav. Now, when we said in Halacha Yud that the obligation is only if they were born into your herd, and therefore a big rule that if I, the Balabas, if I sold you my animals prior to me taking off Ma'aser Behema, I circumvented the holding of Ma'aser Behema. That's only because you bought it after it was ra'ui to be tithed by me. But if it was born into my herd, but I sold it to you prior to it being on the 8th day, which means I was unable to do it yet, then you, the loikeach, you're chayev to do it. That's halach over here. Ein halakuach patur. This thing that we learned that the purchaser b'chalal is exempt is ela im nilkach achar shenira leis asher, once it was fit to be tied. Lefikach halakech toloim, just like we had just before in halacha yud beis. Halakech asaru ubarim b'me'ei imam. Then kulam nechnasim ladir. Same thing over here. You bought them once they were born, but they were all b'toich shivas hayom b'toich shivas yimei haledam. Now kishegias manam, yes, the purchaser chayv la asron. Because shekivan she'ein mechuser zman roili is aser. So this becomes like halacha yud beis. Haneza kemishu like a chobarim and elder b'reshusay. Beautiful. The final halacha of this chapter, halacha tezai, called behemish yisofik. In bas meiser he in a bas meiser, as we will see in the later chapters. Guys, we're going to see this more in the later chapters. If there is a doubt, harehi pturim en ha-meiser. Harehi pturim en ha-meiser lefikach. Even let's go back to what we learned above. That we just learned, or if one animal that's lukuach from the 8th day and further, it got mixed in. Look at what happens. Lakula, kulam peturin, because shekol echad mehem safiku. When it comes to living beings, they're not bottled. Normally, it's the worst thing. Normally, once you have an animal that's kachim, it gets mixed with other animals, it makes a complication. Here, the Adarab. Here, since an animal that's potter min ha-meiser, even if you have now a suffix, none of these animals have to be tied. And really, as we'll see in the next chapter, like we mentioned, just to close this chapter and to restart the next chapter, that meiser behema is not like produce. Produce is inherently also to be consumed prior to it being tied. We don't view that on meiser behema. Yes, I am chayev to be ma'aser by behemoths, but like we just learned in this chapter, if I were to sell it after they are from the 8th day on, the whole thing is not chayev. Okay, Atkan. Chavah, we are starting now today's 3rd chapter. We are learning now the 7th chapter, Peirik Shvi of Hilchas B'chayres. Here, the Rambam has to describe the procedure, how we separate meiser. In other words, let me just say something. The word meiser is used when we give a tenth. Like Meiser Rishon, right? Like Meiser Sheni, or like Meiser Min Ha-Meiser, just 10 of the 10. So the way I do it by produce is that if I know that I have now, let's say I have 100 apples, right? So what did we learn? I give 2 apples to the coin. I have 98 apples. From the 98 apples, what do I have to give of Meiser Rishon? 9.8. If I know I have 98 apples, I take 9.8 and I separate it and I say Meiser Rishon. I don't have to handle all of the 98 apples. No, we're not allowed to give a Meiser Umados. I have to give it b'diuk. But if I know the number, I separate a 10. That's not the way Meiser Behema works. If I know I have 100 behemoths in the corral, I'm not allowed to take 10 and say Meiser. It won't be effective. There's a procedure, as we'll learn in this chapter. This chapter has 9 halachas, beginning with halacha al. Says the Rambam, a person owns, make it simple, you own 10. You know, many people, especially by the minyan, we're not allowed to count people, ever. Right? So, you have different ways of counting the minyan, different psukim, but many people are, you get used to with the minyan. You take a look and you see 10. I'm sure people with greater minds can see more. The Rambam is giving this just as a mashal because it's common if you deal with animals that you take one glance and you know you have 10. But you know you have 10. So you know, I'm going to do the mitzvah. The mitzvah is to give a 10th, to give one. So someone is going to go ahead and he's going to remove from the 10 one, the hifresh echad meiser. Not good, but it's not only 1 from 10. If you have meya, so you say, I have 100 behemoths. I know that 10 of them I have to be meiser behemah. Let me just separate 10. The hifresh asar el meiser. Ein elu meiser. There is a procedure allocated. So what must be done? Step number 1 is koines kol ataloyim, oy kol ha'agolim. As we learned in the previous chapter, meiser behemah is only on bakar b'tzoyin. So here, taloyim goes to the tzoyin, either lambs or sheep. Agolim goes to little oxen, little behemoth, little calves. Ladir means to a corral. That means you put them in a enclosed area, and in that enclosed area you create a little opening. Wapshat little, narrow meaning that only one animal can go out at a time. And now you have to motivate the animals. They should on their own go out of the corral. How do you motivate the animals to go out of the corral? You put their mothers outside. And the mothers are going to be goyois. The mothers are going to be, in English, bleeding. They're going to be calling out for the kids. The kids are going to want to go to the moms. And naturally, what will the kinderlach do? They're going to go to the mamas. And like this, is that you have to create a setting where the little animals are going out on their own initiative. You're not pushing them out. Shenemar, as it says, all that passes. It's all that, not all that you force to pass. That passes, meaning Chazal tell us they have to pass on their own initiative, and not that you should be the one moving them out. Even though you can argue, what do you mean? You put the mothers out. That's indirect. They're going because the mothers are calling them. Now, so now that they're moving out on their own, that's the key, on their own initiative. You, the owner, you're going to be standing or sitting somewhere right by that Pesach cotton. That's a great picture. And you're going to count. Ideally, you're holding already a staff in your hand. The animals can be counted. Not like people. Echad, Shnayim, Shloisha, Arba, Chamisha, Shisha, Shiva, Shmoina, Tisha. And now, V'hayotza Asiri, doesn't make a difference whether it's male or female. Doesn't make a difference whether the animal is tamim or balmum. And really, as we learned in the previous chapter, you include in the corral hakol achnasim ladir. We learned even isurim mizbeach. So let's say, so if the animal that's going out was in muktzah, or God forbid, or reveya v'nirba, that animal won't be fit for the altar. No matter whichever one goes out, you have on your staff red paint, and now you smear the red paint on the back of the animal. It's time to know, if I'm not mistaken, that I think it was the Apterov, who was that Tzaddik Elyon, that he had on his back certain red marks, if I'm not mistaken. And he said that in his first, he remembers, he was from the son of Yaakov Avinu. And he was painted by Yaakov, Maisa Behema. Imagine. And that was his red mark. Now, if you didn't do all these steps, that means if you didn't paint it with the red paint, or if you didn't count it with the shaver, or, here's the key. Halacha Aleph is, I can't just take one. But what happens if I counted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, but I didn't count them when they're moving out? They were all in the corral, and they were all revutzim. They were lying down. That's also good. Why is it good, b'diavad? Because I'm counting 1, 2, verstehst? Or if they were standing, the point is, it's not that they're going out. But if I counted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, then it works. The key is hoyel umena'on asara. As long as I counted 10 by 10, and I verbally was mekadesh the 10, then hareze meiser.
What about the part that he has to go out on his own will without somebody pushing?
So that's not essential. That's what the Rambam is teaching us. That's lechatchila, not b'diavad. Halacha beis. Let's say that you, Baruch Hashem, you are a wealthy guy. You have animals all over the place. You don't have to combine all of them in the same corral. If you have different herds in different places, you are allowed to put them together. Meaning, now 1 second. What happens? Listen, I know that if I'm not going to have at least 10 in each corral, none of them are going to be my sebehema. So what happens if I own a couple of animals in Yerushalayim? I own a couple of animals in Akko, and none of them are 10. But if I'm going to put them together, I'll have 10. If we can ask the people to please silence themselves, that will be amazing. So, and you have another 5 in Akko. This halacha that ain't sarach letzarei is very important. Now, if you want to do it gesund hate, but you don't have to do it, which means that you won't give meiser at all. Eimet starfen. The kulan puturim in a meiser. I don't know if eimet starfen means you're not allowed to or you don't have to. Maybe it means that you don't. You don't. Wouldn't be affected. Now, what is the distance? For kama yiu ben elu elu starfu 16 mil. Right? Remember, guys, 1 mil is approximately 1 kilometer. However, let's go into these cases. If you have 3 adorim and ben kol echad v'yachad, you have the 16, right? Not more. Not more. Between the one to the right and the one to the left, the place you have 32. But since between each one you have 16 and not more, then you do combine all 3 of them. For example, if you have 9 on one edge, you have 9 on the other edge. The echad be'emsa, so then you put them all together. You put them. The Rambam was also emphasizing, as we'll see explicitly later in this chapter, when you have 9 and 9 in one, how many do you have? You have 19, right? You have 9. You have 18.
19. 9 and 1 is 19.
19,
Yeah.
but why a 1 considered to be an Eder? What's the minimum amount for Eder?
Very good. That's another thing. No, the Rambam is teaching us many dinim. That 1 means it's you own it. It means I own herds of animals. Malabatim. I am a manager. What are you managing? I'm managing one little behemoth. There's many things. Another point is that you're going to combine them all together. You're not going to have 20. So a person can think that Rambam's going to write that clearly, explicitly later. Why do I have to even put them together? In other words, I know that only when I have 10, from 10 I'll have to give 1. If I'll have 20, I'll have to give 2. No, you put all of the behemoth together, whatever the number. And if you have what's left over less than 10, and a chanami, so then that one you won't separate the mice. Halacha 10, halacha dal, halacha 4. You don't combine cattle and sheep. Avol, but in the category of tzoyin, the fact that the Torah uses the word tzoyin for both sheep and goats, yes, ma'asrin min akavosin aloisin or min akavosin. And we had the pasuk before. Kol ma'aser bakav tzoyin. So kol mashma tzoyin echad. All, let's call this light domesticated animals, are included in one category. The Torah calls them all tzoyin. Sheshneim, and also, by the way, they're both called tzoyin and they're both called seh. Sheshneim, the Kroim said that we have explicitly in the Torah, in Parshas Re'eh, right? The Torah says, say kivasim, or kisavim, say izim, same seh. So they could be put together. That's again the first Mishnah on Rosh Hashanah, the Arba Rosh Hashanim. We Hasidim, we have the Yutas Kislev. But we spoke about this when we learned the Mishnah in Masechtas Rosh Hashanah. Over here, you cannot put in the same corral from different years. Where do we have that from? Now, as the Rambam will clearly make himself known, that's an asmachta. Sounds like it's a scripture. Shenemar, he's quoting a pasuk. I know that. Shana shana, right? That which is produced from the field year for year. However, says that Rambam v'yirali, that if the person did combine she'im iser behema mishana al shana, yes, it's binding. Why? Mepnei chumas hakotshim. Sharei lo yikpi the Torah al masa behema befeida she'iyah shana shana. It's really because the Torah juxtaposes ma'aser behema with ma'aser of produce. By produce it is a binding, not over here. In other words, the meiser will be binding. Okay, halacha vav. Kol hanilodim echad b'tishrei. So now the question is, what's the Rosh Hashanah l'maisa behema? And the Rambam is telling you it's echad b'tishrei, which means all animals that are born from echad b'tishrei until 29th of Elul, mitzdarfin uma'asrin me'elu alelu. Aber if, just for example, and 5 other animals to you, to the balabayis, one day later, another din. There are animals that they who are born this year can get pregnant and give birth in the same halachic year. Then they are combined together. Yoldu have a lodis b'toich shenasan. If the animal gave birth to its offspring on the year that it was born, harehi ubita nechnasis ladir leisaser. Halacha zayin. Ein ataloyim nohanolodim k'moy tevel. We spoke this out in the last chapter. This is foundational. We don't view the animals that are born into your earth the way we view tevel, which is it's as a iser chefze. She'asur lechem memenu achi yis aser. As we learn in the dinim of Zroim, right? Ela muter limkoy v'lishchoy kol ma sheyirtze achi yis aser. And that's why we had in the previous chapter, right, in Perek Shishi, in Halacha Yud, that if you purchased animals after they entered their 8th day, there won't be Meiser Behema on it. Because, yeah, you missed the opportunity of doing the mitzvah. But the animals are not also. Now, the words of the Rambam are a little bit difficult. We're reading the words, the girsa that we have. In other words, since meiser is allowed to be sold or to be slaughtered, even after they entered their phase where the mechuyev to be meisered, if then meiser was taken off, now they have a din of meiser behim. Now they have to be slaughtered in the Azara. Now they have to be eaten in Yerushalayim. But if you circumvented it by not doing meiser, it's not inherently prohibited. Halacha ches kovu chachamim. Now, even though meiser is 1 year on itself, like the Rambam says, me'echad b'tishrei until chav tes elul, and on top of that, it's not like if you didn't do it, you can't eat it. You can eat it. Nevertheless, the Chachamim said that throughout the year there are 3 times, there are 3 zman and bashana that people should then tithe. L'maaseh behema. And midrabanan u'mishiagia zman mehen. Once these 3 dates comes, midrabanan osur le'limkoi or lishchait achi ya'aser. Now, another, even though there is an isur derabanan, the isur derabanan is also not an isur on the chefza. That if someone did not abide by this rabbinic, the im shachat hadei muter. What are the shloisha zmanim? By the way, they're called the goyden. The goyden from Ma'aseh Behema. Haveilah shloisha zmanim. The yom chamisha also yom kredim Pesach. 15 days before Pesach. Who can tell me what date that is? Don't give me Rosh Chodesh. Rosh Chodesh is 14 days before Pesach. Pesach is on the 15th day. 15 days before Pesach is the last day of Adar. And until the coming of Mashiach, we already know, right? We learned Kiddush HaChodesh. We learned the system. That Adar, Hasamach L'Nissen, always has 30 days. Always has 30 days. The way we would call today, we have 2 days Rosh Chodesh Nissen. Always. Okay. But in other words, on the 30th of Adar. Ubeyom Chamisha Asar, on the 15 days prior to Atzeres, and 15 days before the Chag, right, the last day of Elul. Now, these 3 days are called Goyden Ma'aseh Behema. Now, beautiful, the word Goyden means the threshing floor. If you remember, by Ma'aseh, there are various steps. One step, one foundational step, is called Gemar Melach. Gemar Melach was even if the product reached it's enough of maturity for you to be chayiv to tithe it, but when are you chayiv to tithe it? By the Gemar Melach. Prior to Gemar Melach, if you remember, there's a lot of leniencies. Not to eat it achilas kavah, but you can eat achilas aray. Gemar Melach by produce is when it's on the threshing for really it's the meruach. So Chazal borrowed that term. Since that midrabanan, you can't sell it or eat it after that date, we call this date Goyden L'Maaseh Behema. And say so, Oimer Zak the Rambam, Shahagaroni Shal Ma'aseh Behema, is going to be b'yoyim achroi michodesh Adar. It's going to be ub'yoyim chamish or shloishim esfira soimer. That's easy. It's amazing. And ub'yoyim achroi michodesh Elul. The law of Kama Hagaranis b'yom Elu. So the Rambam is going to write something beautiful. Even though, as the Rambam wrote in Halacha Zayin, that prior to separating Meiser Behemo, prior to putting them inside the corral to follow this procedure, if you want, you can sell it. Yidden did not do it. We want to keep mitzvahs. So since we would wait to sell it, we would wait to shecht it until we actually took Meiser, we want for there to be an abundance of animals for the Yidden that are going oil regalim. Nevertheless, nevertheless, mamish beautiful. So they wanted by this date everyone will do it. Now everyone is going to feel free to sell their animals. There'll be a lot of animals. There'll be a lot of merchandise. It's going to facilitate people. It's going to be less expensive. Final halacha of this chapter, halacha test. You did the right thing. You put all of the animals. Now, you're not going to have always the exact numbers, right? You're not going to have 10 or 20 or 30 or 40 or 50. You might have 15. You might have 29. Point is that you're going to have some remaining animals. So what is the din? Since they were born in this year, we don't say they were in the corral, they are exempt. They're not exempt. You have to separate these animals. They can go into the deer again when you have new animals born on this year. Goylen acher means in this year, and we are recounted. By the way, they were never counted. Because you look inside the corral, you see you don't have that number. Now, a guy can say, I don't have to count. I see I have 12 animals. Why should I even put the 12 inside the corral? By the Goyden Meiser Behema. Anyways, these two don't have another 8. Anyways, I'll have to put them into the corral next time, this year. Let me leave them out. No, that you can't do. Now that it's the Goyden Lamaser Behema, put all of the animals into the deer. And now we say, Vahanisha Yishoer. Vahanisha Yishoer. Gavaldik.
Why don't you just put a yellow paint on him? I just wondering why
guys, just to know that it turns out that tomorrow we're continuing, which is nice. At least we're not going to start a new topic. Tomorrow's 3 will be Shmini and then Shkagais. All right. Gavaldik.